So now let us start with our second part of India's foreign trade and trade deficit. In the first part, we have discussed up to 1956 and 61 period. Now let us discuss about the period from 1961 to 65. During this period also, 1961 to 65, the imports are almost same. A reduction in the import of food grains, but the import of capital goods which are required for the production process and the import of equipment, import of machinery and the rapid modernization of industry which facilitated for further imports, all those continued. Then what are the other imports which are imported during 1961 and 65? We will discuss now. You know, during 1961 and 65 period, the import situation as well as the trade deficit of India became worse. Why it has become worse than the previous? Let us discuss now. The reason is, during the period of 1961 and 65, we had two immediate and consecutive hesitations with Pakistan and China. India had consecutive hesitations, almost a war-like situation, a severe war-like situation existed at the boundaries, and that led to continuous import of defense equipment. Continuous import of defense equipment. And this defense equipment, you know what happens when we are importing defense equipment? Huge costs incurred on the imports of India, resulting in a trade deficit. You know, almost the imports cost like around 1225 crores during this period. 1225 crores is the annual average imports, and almost the trade deficit was around 780 crores. At the end of this part 2, I will give clear statistics of annual average trade deficits for each phase. Now just remember these statistics with the class, but the actual statistics from the RBI bulletin will be given at the end of this class on the board. Now listen to me. With the hesitations of Pakistan and China, the imports rose up. Because of the defense equipment imports, acute trade deficit came to 780 crores, and this was along with the other imports which are continued from the beginning, like technological import, like capital goods import, machinery import, equipment import, and rapid modernization and expansion of heavy industry in India also boosted up the imports. The reason I already told you that the reduction in the import of food grains is the land reforms introduced by India, which distributed some amount of land to the landless labours, and the abolition of Jamindari, Raitwari and Mahalwari system brought back the farmers to cultivation, and more land came under cultivation. So because of that reason, reduction in the import of food crops was observed, but remaining capital goods import and machinery and equipment imports continued. Then after 61 and 65 period, since during the war we had an emergency, India stopped the planning period, and the budget also is not a regular budget, and a plan holiday was observed by India from 1966 to 69 for a period of 3 years. 1966-67, it is a 1-year plan. 67 to 68, again 1-year plan. 68 to 69, again 1-year plan. Of course, we don't need about a 68-69 period, but let us understand the phase from 1968 to 1973. Now, I hope you understood about the 61 and 65 period, why the imports rose up. The hesitations with Pakistan and China resulted in a huge import of defense equipment. Now, let us go to the next phases. See, before going to the next phase, I would like to explain you something, that with the acute trade deficits accumulating to a huge foreign reserves deficiency, Why that trade deficit leads to foreign resource deficiency? See, we are importing from some other country. So we are buying from some other country. When we are buying from a foreign country, if we pay it in rupees, they won't accept the money. So what we have to do? With our money, we have to buy dollars or the currency of that particular country, and the amount only should be paid in that particular currency only, not in rupees. For that purpose, what we will do? We will use already the foreign reserves which are with the country, and we will pay the money in those foreign currencies. That results in a downfall of the foreign reserves already existing with the country. So for a future motive, we have to again buy the foreign currency. So it looks like a single issue, but it will give rise to dual burden. What is the dual burden? One is already existing foreign reserves will be existing with a shortfall. The reserves will be coming down because we are paying in foreign currency. Okay, that is one burden. This burden will eventually force the country to buy more foreign currency because it has to maintain the adequate reserves, otherwise someday it may get a shortfall. So it is a single issue but resulting in two dual effects. What are the dual effects? One is the reduction in the reserves of foreign exchange of India which are already existing, and this reduction will eventually force to buy some more foreign reserves from the currency market to maintain adequate reserves so that a sudden crisis may not occur. So it is a dual effect. Because of that, always with the trade deficit mounting more and more, the India is facing a foreign exchange reserves deficiency, which is a severe problem for any country. Now, it has to restrict the imports. So, after the war, that is during this phase 1966 and 67, in the year 1966, India took a tactical decision. What is that decision? Devaluation of Indian rupee. Devaluation of Indian rupee by 36.5%. What is this devaluation of Indian rupee? For example, let us say the value of 1 rupee is something around 2x. The value of 1 rupee is something around 2x right now. But this value is huge for 1 rupee. Let us assume at this point of time, this value of 2x is a huge burden regarding the value of 1 rupee. So I am devaluing it. Devaluing it means reducing the value of 1 rupee to something else called 2x. This is the value. Minus, that means we are reducing. Devaluing means reducing the value. So 2x minus say something for which we are reducing the value. Here I already told you the devaluation of Indian rupee. That means the value of Indian rupee was reduced by government of India itself by a percentage of 36.5. So let us say the value of 1 rupee at 1966 and before period is 2x. Now at the present time, that is 1966, government of India devalued the rupee by 36.5%. That means the existing value minus 36.5% means a value of 36.5% of this 2x has been cut down in the value of rupee by government of India itself. The government of India itself took the decision. Why? What is the reason behind this devaluation of Indian rupee? Now clearly understand and concentrate here. See, once clearly observe this graph. Here, X means nothing but imports and Y means nothing but rupee value. You know what happens? If the rupee value is increasing, something around here, the imports will come down. Why the imports will come down when the rupee value is increasing? Sorry, the rupee value is increasing. That means imports will be increasing. Sorry, forgive me. Rupee value is increasing. Imports will come down. Sorry, imports will increase. Why the imports will increase when the rupee value is increasing? Both are directly proportional. Why? See, I will explain you it in an example. There is a father, say X, and this father had a son Y, and this son Y is studying in a foreign country. He is studying something MS in a foreign country, say USA. Now, let us assume that the value of $1 is something around 60 rupees. And when the value of $1 is something around 60 rupees, let us assume the fees of this student Y in a college or university in USA is something around $2,000. As I told you, for $1 it is 60 rupees. For $2,000, what is the total amount in rupees? So, nothing but the total amount in rupees is 1,20,000 rupees. So, this father X will pay an amount of 1,20,000 rupees as a fees for his son Y in a university in USA, which is equal to $2,000 in the currency of that country. So, $2,000 is equal to 1,20,000. So, if he pays 1,20,000, the $2,000 fees is written off. Now, let us assume that rupee became stronger by something around 3 rupees, or something around 5 rupees. For easy calculation, let us assume that rupee became stronger by 5 rupees. So, $1 will be equal to, since the rupee became stronger, this $1 will be equal to 55 rupees. Because I told you, the rupee became stronger by 5 rupees. So now, $1 is equal to 55 rupees. But the fees in American university will not change. It is the same, $2,000. But right now, with this scenario, the father don't need to pay this 1,20,000 rupees. Now the amount will come down. Now see, let us calculate here. He is gaining around 10,000 rupees here, because when it is 55 rupees for $1, $2,000 means it is 1,10,000. So now if the father pays just 1,10,000 rupees, then his son's fees will be written off for the same $2,000. So that means if the rupee is becoming stronger, we have to pay less. If the rupee is becoming weak, we have to pay more. Just you understand from this example. When it is 60 rupees, the father had to pay 1,20,000 rupees for this $2,000. When it is 55 rupees, the father just need to pay 1,10,000 rupees to return off this $2,000. The same way, when we have to pay for some imports, if the value of rupee is stronger, it is easy for us to pay. When the value of rupee is becoming weak, it is tough for us to pay. So we have to pay more. So if the rupee is becoming stronger, the payment will come down. So since it is a benefit for us, the imports will be increasing, because who knows, the other day the rupee may become weak, we have to pay more. Since the rupee is stronger now, whatever the needs, let us import now. So when the rupee's value is strong, imports will increase. So if the value of rupee is devaluated by government of India, devaluation means rupee is becoming weak by something around 36.5%. Just now I told you 36.5% is the devaluation of rupee in the year 1966 by government of India. So the value of rupee is coming down. The value of rupee is coming down by 36.5%. So almost both are directly proportional. Since the rupee value is coming down because of devaluation, imports will come down. Imports will come down. Since the imports are coming down, there is no need to pay more by the government of India. When the imports are coming down, trade deficit also comes down. And thus, if the trade deficit comes down, the foreign exchange reserves will be in somewhat healthy situation. With this logic, government of India devalued the rupee. But even though it is a good tactics, unfortunately, this didn't show an immediate effect. Why? Because of what reason it didn't show the immediate effect? Now clearly understand. The reason that it did not show immediate effect is post-war situation of India. Post-war situation of India means during this period we had some aggressions. After the war, we have to bring our production capability again into the streamline. During the war time, you know, the production of major industries and regular industries will be stopped. During the war, only heavy industries which are useful as a war equipment will be carried on with the production, and the production caliber of the remaining industries will also be put in only the war industries. Such industries which will only be carried on during the war period, since the regular industries production will be stopped, are called as war babies. War babies means those industries which only run during the war time, and all the production capabilities will be shifted onto this war industries only. The regular production will be almost in a halted situation. Such industries are called war babies. Since now the war had stopped, now the production calibers should be shifted back to the regular industries, and it is a gradual time taking process. Moreover, since the regular production was halted, there will not be any storage of raw materials, etc., etc. Now again the production almost starts counting from zero. Now again start the production, almost a beginning stage once again. So with that, for a particular 59 classes of industries, Government of India announced a liberalization policy. 59 industries are announced a mandatory liberalization policy. Mandatory liberalization of imports policy. This mandatory liberalization of imports policy had made liberalization of imports compulsory under any circumstances to this particular 59 industries, that is to again streamline the production of the country after the war period. And during this period 1966-67, another blow to the government of India is a acute drought during this period. 1966-67 is the worst drought during the journey of India, and that brought a huge acute shortfall of food crops, and just we cannot imagine the amount of food crops that are imported during this period 66-67. With these two effects, the effect of of devaluation of rupee didn't show any positive effects immediately. Moreover, during the 1961 and 65 aggression with Pakistan and China, India had shown empty hands by other countries. Almost by other countries, India was shown empty hands. Of course, some countries supported us, but that is not up to the brim. So what happened? India had a thought that we have to attain self-efficiency. For that reason, during this planned holiday period, India had announced mobilization of resources and self-efficiency as a motto. So with this objective, mobilization of resources and self-efficiency incurred huge costs on the government of India to get complete technological import, and with that reason only these 59 industries were announced liberalization policy. And this drought and this policy after the post-war period and mobilization of resources, all these increased the trade deficit of India to an highest level, almost the highest level, reaching something around 900 range, 900 crore. 900 crore is the trade deficit. Of course, on an average, it came down due to some happy situations and good scenario in the next phases. Now let us go through the next phase. What is the next phase? 1967 and 68. What happened during this 1967 and 68? Again the same situation in the food crops due to bad weather. We cannot say this is a drought, but during 1967 and 68 period, the bad weather again gave another blow to the crops of India. So again the import of food crops continued. Import of food crops again continued, and as usual, technological know-how and equipment to somewhat important and heavy industries, and small scale industries development has been taken as a motive by the recent industrial policy of India during this period, 1967 and 68. That is, during 1961 and 68, small scale industry development was considered as a motive. With that motive, which was officially implemented from almost 1971 and 75, support to small scale industries also resulted in import of technology and capital goods and raw materials. So again a liberalization policy was announced, and this liberalization policy, which was a continuation of the previous phase liberalization policy, also once again shoot up the imports, and the situation continued with the trade deficit. 1967-68, we can say from this period onwards, after this period onwards, somewhat happy situations turned towards India. What are they? Now let us discuss them from the period of 1968 and 1973. When the government of India thought that the liberalization was enough for now and we imported what we need, so let us postpone the policy of liberalization policy. The government of India started imposing restrictions on the imports from the next phase onwards, that is almost from the period of 1968 onwards. From 1968 onwards, restriction on imports. Restriction on imports. With this, since the liberalization of imports was restricted, imports came down a little bit, and from 1968 to almost between 72, the crops are good. Since the crops are good, Food grain import also came down. What is that? Food grains import came down. Food grains import came down. Then, you know one thing, petroleum and oil products are the huge imports of India from the beginning. They are the petroleum and oil products are the huge imports of India. But God blessed with around $5 billion of natural gas reserves and petroleum reserves to India near to its coastal line. We call that as the Bombay Highway, which was discovered by ONGC of India. So from 1970 onwards, ONGC was blessed with huge petroleum and oil reserves, and that brought a sharp decline in the imports of petroleum products of India. We call that $5 billion worth natural resources in the Bombay as the Bombay Highway. Since ONGC is gearing up the production of petroleum and oil products, the imports started declining. So now restriction on imports brought the imports down. Crops were good, so food grain imports came down. And petroleum and oil reserves were found by ONGC on a large scale, and huge imports of petroleum and oil products also came down, and this situation brought good signs to India. And during the period of 1972 and 1973, first time India had a surplus in the trade balance. So there is no trade deficit during this period, and the surplus was 69 crores. I told you that is a surplus, so here I kept a positive sign. If you observe in the previous class, I kept a negative sign because that is a trade deficit. Now I kept here this plus. It is not for statistics purpose, but this plus indicates that India came in a trade surplus. That means there is no trade deficit, but a positive in the trade balance of India, with exports overcoming imports. That is for the first time after the independence by government of India in the year 1972 and 73. 1972 and 73, first time since independence, a surplus in trade balance of India, which is, sorry, it is not 69 crore, forgive me, it is 104 crores. It is 104 crores. This 104 crores is the surplus of India's trade, and this is the first time since the independence of India that India is having a surplus in trade balance, that is exports overcame imports. But this was just a 3-day happiness, because even though India is trying to come into the surplus in trade balance, the global situations worsened the situation of India in the year 1973 and 74. 1973 and 74. This 1973 and 74 again immediately shot back India to a huge trade deficit of order around 470 crores trade deficit. Minus indicates again trade deficit. Why immediately the next year India had a 1973-74 trade deficit? See, in the previous phase, due to ONGC discovering huge natural resources, the imports of petroleum and oil products came down, but never the imports of petroleum and oil products was stopped, because the consumption is huge. Why? Because the population is much and the necessity is much. So imports are continuing, but came down with ONGC's discovery. But that imports now cost much to India due to 1973-74 huge petroleum crisis in the global world. The 73 and 74 is the year marked by huge petroleum crisis in the global world, which also affected India along with other countries, even though the import of petroleum and oil products came down in the previous period. What happened here? Now let us discuss with the 73 and 74 crisis. See, in the year 1973 and 74, the global world faced some panic situations in the petroleum and oil rates. Why? What happened? First, let us understand what happened in the global world. Usually, there will be different currencies for different countries. So, there will be many foreign currencies. You know what happened? All the foreign currencies should be measured by something stable. Only then the conversion and easy trade will be possible. During those days, almost all the foreign currencies are measured against a stable currency which was agreed upon by all the international traders and trading communities, called US dollar. All the foreign currencies are measured against the US dollar in a pegged system. What is this pegged system? Pegged means something fixed. Pegged means something fixed. So here in a pegged system means, for example, say that 1 US dollar is equals to always something around 10 rupees. I am speaking about the situation in 1973-74. So 1 US dollar is equal to always 10 rupees. It is pegged, it is fixed. And let us say something around dirhams. So 1 US dollar is equal to something around 3 dirhams. Something around 3 dirhams. And 1 US dollar is equal to something around 1.5 euros. Something around 1.5 euros. And something around 1 US dollar is equal to 0.5 pounds. 0.5 pounds. All these are examples. I didn't mean these are the actual values. Remember, all these are just examples. These statistics didn't mean the actual values during 73 and 74. Why these are given as examples means, this is a fixed rate against the US dollar, which was considered as the most stabilized currency during that period. Then with what is this US dollar was measured as a fixed and stable currency? Only the US dollar was measured against what is the other thing that is precious with which the US dollar is measured? With gold. With gold. During this process, all the foreign currencies are pegged against US dollar, and this US dollar is always pegged against the value of gold. This is the actual measurement for the medium of exchange that is accepted by the international traders up to the period of 1972 and 73. Just before 72 and 73, USA came out of this process, and this itself allowed the US dollar to float against the other currencies. That is, the value of US dollar, which was actually pegged, now it is allowed for free floating. USA it itself came out of this process. Why? What maybe happened for taking such a decision is USA thought that the value of dollar is increasing. That means the value of dollar is increasing means, remember the previous example which I explained to you with 1 rupee. When the value of US dollar is increasing, the US has to pay, when the value of US dollar is increasing in its value, the US has to pay a less amount in dollars for imports. I think you are understanding. When the value of US dollar is increasing, it has to pay less dollars for paying for its imports. But even though the value of US dollar is increasing, in the international trade system, it was pegged against the value of gold. So, even though the value of US dollar is increasing, US thought that it is paying much. So, if it allowed the value of dollar to flow freely against the other currencies, then US may benefit out when the dollar's value is increasing by paying less in amounts. Why the US took such decisions, you know, at that time US is also one of those countries which is importing the petroleum and oil products on a large scale. Even though the US dollar's value is increasing with the development of its economy, since its value is fixed against the value of gold, there is no use even though the value is increasing and US is paying much. And not only that, if the US dollar's value is allowed for a free floating, as I told you, the value of imports comes down with the graph I already told you, and so for imports the US may pay less and imports may be rising, but that is not going to be a problem. Why? Because the value of currency is rising, but that benefit is not in the hands of USA because of this pegged system. So if this pegged system was written off, what happens? USA may benefit with this free floating mechanism. So USA it itself came out of this free floating mechanism, and Britain followed the US by allowing its pound to free float against the other currencies, and the other countries also started following the same mechanism, and so measuring them against a value of gold was written off. See, foreign currencies are following US. US followed gold. That means indirectly these foreign currencies also following gold. Indirectly these foreign currencies also following gold. But now USA came out of this process and allowed the dollar to flow freely, and Britain followed, and the other countries also started with a free floating of their currencies against the other currencies. What happened? A fixed mechanism of measuring them with the value of gold is written off. Measuring them with the value of gold was written off. What happened? This made a disruption in the amount received by the oil and petroleum exporting countries. OPEC. OPEC means oil and petroleum exporting currencies. And these oil and petroleum exporting currencies, with the sudden change in the global world that the foreign currencies were left freely to float against the other currencies, OPEC thought that they are receiving lesser amount compared with the previous, and they also thought that in the past also they received some less amount, and they thought they are in huge loss, and maybe that is right. And the oil and petroleum exporting countries, they almost tripled the cost of the barrel of petroleum. That is, with this sudden change by USA and Britain and by other countries, the OPEC countries, which gave 1 barrel of petroleum for nearly for $3, they tripled the price, and from 1973 and 74 onwards, the cost of 1 barrel is $12. So the burden was tripled on the US dollar. Not only on that, almost all the currencies faced the same situation. So now the burden was tripled, and this is known as the OPEC Crisis of 1973 and 74. And this global scenario, along with other countries, also affected India. And because of that reason, the petroleum imports has become a huge burden to India from 1973 and 74 onwards, and that worsened the situation of India, and it continued up to the next year's March. Some negotiations are carried on with the global countries and OPEC, and so that negotiations brought back the cost of the petroleum, but not to the previous $3, but something around $6 to $9, which continued a burden. But the worst situation of $12 came back to $6 to $9. But that is a burden again, because in the past they used to pay $3, but now they have to pay something around $6 to $9. So it is a burden. This affected the Indian imports, and again India came into the trade deficit from the trade surplus in the 70 to 73 to trade deficit again in 73 and 74. Now what happened in the next phase? Next phase, in the sense, after 74, what happened? See, that is the time a sign of political instability in India. Why? For the first time in the year 1977, at the center, a new government was established in 1977 and 78. That is, for the first time, the Indian National Congress was taken out by Janata government under the ruling of Morarji Desai. And the signs that Janata government is going to take over the Congress at the center, the signs appeared from 1974 onwards. Between 1974 and 1977, we had some emergency in some northern states of India. The emergency imposed by the government of Indira Gandhi, and that political instability also showed a bad impact on the Indian economy. Moreover, to cover the situation of emergency as well as to cover the political imbalance in the country, the two parties, Congress from 1974 to 77 and Janata government after 1977 and 78, both of them in a competition gave away the liberalization policy as a gift to the industrial sector without thinking even a bit. We call that as a liberalization policy of no thought. The economists call it as a liberalization policy of no thought. That liberalization policy of no thought between the period of 1974 and 77 until 80 worsened the situation of India's trade deficit, and a huge trade deficit of between 2,700 to something around 5,186 crores came out as the trade deficit. Any comparison with the figures? Where was the 470 crores trade deficit before 72 and 73? And by the time it is reaching something like 1980 it rose to 5,186 crores trade deficit. From 1974 to by 1980, the trade deficit reached this 5,186 crores mark, and 1982, during this time India was unable to accompany this trade deficit, and during this period India went to IMF, that is International Monetary Fund, and took a loan. India went to International Monetary Fund and took a loan during this period 1980 to 1982, so that it may try to streamline the disrupted economy with huge trade deficits. But the efforts that are put forward by India have been once again given a blow by the world global scenario. What happened again? In 1983, again the petroleum crisis existed due to Iran and Iraq war. The war between Iran and Iraq, this war resulted in a stopping of the production of petroleum in both the countries. We already know that Iran and Iraq were one of the largest producers of petroleum and oil products. And this Iran and Iraq's war resulted in a shortfall of the supply of petroleum, and again the prices of petroleum shot up to a just unimaginable rate of $100 almost to a barrel. $100 almost to a barrel, and it is a heavy blow to the government of India. And from then onwards, between 1983 to by the time of 1990, the trade deficit of India reached with huge imports amounting to almost 12,000 crores. Imports were of order 12,000 crores, and the accumulated trade deficit from 1983 to 1990, year by year, just gave a foreign exchange reserves deficit blow to India, and we were left with empty hands. Unable to do anything. And in the year 1990, again government of India took a huge bailout loan of order between $1.1 billion and gradually was raised to almost $5 billion. Almost to $5 billion in the year 1990 and 91. Why see, this Iran-Iraq war not only created a shortfall in the production of petroleum and resulted in huge rise in the prices, but apart from that, this also showed an effect in the rise of prices of fertilizers and other important raw materials that led to a huge import burden to India, and unable to cope up with that burden, even though the exports were rising, India has to go for a bailout plan, which eventually forced India to announce foreign direct investments in India with complete liberalization, as well as India had to impose some restrictions on imports, and a reforms in the trade policy of India was also took during this period, that is 1990 and 91. And from then onwards, we can say, even though some disturbances occurred in the trade practice of India, good signs were favorable to the India's trade policy and India's foreign trade. This 12,000 crores, even though it is a worse imports burden to India during the year 1990, but from 1983 to 1990, one favorable thing to India was the exports base of India was expanding with the rise in the imports from fish contents, meat, and also gems and jewel exports worked favorably to the Indian exports. Even though this is of the order 12,000 crores, one good news is during the same period, even though the trade deficit is accumulating year by year, the exports also reached a favorable price of 8,000 crores. 8,000 crores was the mark reached by the Indian exports during the same period. But even though this is the average mark reached by the Indian exports, there is no use because year by year the deficit is accumulating and the accumulated trade deficit became a huge, and to accompany with that accumulated trade deficit in the year 1990 and 91 in the form of reforms, in the form of economic reforms by completely liberalizing the foreign direct investments and imposing huge restrictions on import policies and totally reforming the trade policy of India, India has got a bailout plan from the World Bank and IMF, and from then onwards, even though there are some disturbances, the trade practices of India are a little bit favorable to the government of India. So with this we almost completed the foreign trade and trade deficit of India up to 1990, but I will give one more class to this India's foreign trade and trade deficit, that is the finishing class of this topic, that is the situation from 1990 to till now, and what are the trade policies of India from the beginning, what are its advantages and drawbacks also will be discussed in that finishing class.